guys, happy Saturday. I want you to know that I have read your comments and I have seen your DMs and your tags. I know that people have been asking about my thoughts on the Epstein Files. And I apologize, I was traveling and working this week and travel just got insane, so I had not been able to sit down and do this episode, even though I wrote it a few days ago. But I think it's important to say that I never just want to yap to yap. I never just want to regurgitate the exact same take that I am seeing online. And this just felt like a behemoth of a subject because they just dropped 3 million new files on Epstein. Like, that is a lot to digest. So I stayed quiet, I observed, I gathered information before sitting down to put this episode together. And I just really think, at the end of the day, that there's a lot of people who are full of crap, including people in our government. Now, guys, there are some outrageous things in this most recent Epstein file drop. I mean, like, outrageous. And we will get to all of that, but I first want to address, like, the general tone of the room and what I'm observing online and in the world right now, because it just hasn't sat right with me, and I think that that's one of the reasons why I've been struggling to know how to address this episode and why I waited a few days. And so let's just dive into that first. So in case you didn't know, the Trump administration released a huge slew of Epstein files last Friday, and it literally set the media ablaze. Now, they are saying this will be the quote-unquote last major drop of Epstein files, but I think it's important to note that that does not mean that it is everything. Stuff is still redacted in these files, files are still being withheld, and there are things that we just probably will never see. I don't know if a future administration will change that. I don't know if Trump in a couple of years will change that. But right now, from where I am sitting, it feels like this is it. And it also feels like this drop seems kind of like fine, like you guys won't shut up about it. Here's the files, go through it. Like, since everybody wants this information so badly, here's 3 million files that you all need to work through. And while, yes, objectively, this is a huge step for transparency on this issue, I don't, and this is where I struggle. I don't really know how productive this actually has been, because it almost feels like all of this was intentionally made incredibly confusing. Like, these files are not organized well, it was a huge drop all at once, and there is so much actual misinformation online. And I do not use that word misinformation lightly, but this actually is misinformation. And I was actually talking to somebody on my work trip in Utah this week who made a really good point and said, I wonder if our government, not the Trump administration, just the government in general, if they waited to release all of these files until AI has progressed to the level that it has, so that people would be swarmed with these 3 million files plus deep fakes and fake emails and AI altered images, all of that, because all of that is a bulk of what I have been having to muddle through online, because so much of it is fake. Now, thank God for community notes on X saying, no, this is AI generated, but it has made things very, very complicated. But regardless, what I really want to say is that all of this has created an environment where every single person, every single group has a different conclusion based on these files. Like, some see this as irrefutable evidence that our government is run by a satanic ring of pedos. Some see this as confirmation that Epstein was Mossad. Bibi Netanyahu was saying, great, now we have confirmation that he was not Mossad. Some people now think that actually nothing happened and that this conspiracy was just fake all along. Some say, especially the left-wing media, are saying that this is absolutely an indictment of Donald Trump, and Trump is saying that this finally absolves him, and we can all move on. Like, guys, these are all things the people are screaming online based on these 3 million files. Like, do you see how insane that is? Like, I feel like I have been going crazy. There is no clarity. There is no consensus, but everyone is telling their audience that they are certain, and the outrage is overwhelming. And in my opinion, it's all a bunch of bullshit, genuinely. Again, because it is 3 million files. 3 million. Like, I saw somebody say that if you printed out all of these emails, like, this is not including the audio recordings, the videos, anything like that, if you printed out all of this and stacked it, those files would be 3 times as tall as the Statue of Liberty. Like, you cannot convince me that all of the people making these broad, sweeping claims, these conclusions, have actually read all of the documents and listened to the hours and hours of recordings. Like, they are basing all of this off of excerpts and drops that other people are posting, other people have found, or they're doing things like going into the files and searching up specific names and terms, keywords, and then going from there. And so I really haven't felt like I, or anyone else, to be honest, are in a position to actually verify any of this, like break it down and offer a well thought out conclusion, because how can you analyze and break down 3 million pages in 24 hours? And that's what a lot of people were saying that they were doing. And so, like, I won't lie, I do not know what all of this means, because I'm letting you know now, I have not read 3 million files. I will never lie to you. There is a lot that I have not read. But I do have some takeaways and some observations from what I have read. And the first thing I'll say is that this is definitely not the concrete, tidy, quote unquote, Epstein list that people have been talking about and looking for and expecting. And honestly, and this feels weird to say, but I don't know if that list actually exists, or if there is one, if anyone in the public will actually see it. I also have a lot of trepidation about the accusations in these files, because contrary to what some other commentators and influencers are saying, those accusations are still just accusations. They are not concrete. They are not verified. Like, some of the insane, disgusting things that are in these files are simply random tips sent to lawyers, some things that were not even strong enough to use in the cases against Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell. We know that Epstein was convicted multiple times. We know that he was a sex offender. We know that he was a freak. And so obviously those accusations could be true, but they also could not be true, because inclusion in these 3 million files is not an automatic confirmation. And so I think that it is very disingenuous for people online to act like it is, because that feels like a very black and white reading of this behemoth of a situation. I think a lot of what happened and what is included in these files post-2008 conviction, post-2011 where he was classified as a high-risk sex offender, I think it was in the United States, maybe it was just in New York State, I don't know, but I think all of that is even more convoluted because there was a financial incentive to be an Epstein victim. And I say this very, very delicately, and I know, like, don't scream at me yet, just listen, because like, this is something that a year ago, I don't know if I would have said, but it is something that I've come to terms with over the last year, because there was an Epstein Victims Fund. I'm not saying that that was wrong. People who are truly victims, they should have been paid out. They should have been compensated. You know, the entire situation, again, is disgusting and awful. But people were paid out millions and millions of dollars from that fund, and it was public. And so I'm not saying that these people are all liars or exaggerating the truth, and we know that there are real victims, but what about the random, unverified people emailing and talking to lawyers in these files? And considering how I feel about the weaponization of the Me Too movement, I do think it is important to be consistent and acknowledge that fact, and acknowledge some of the incentives that were at play that could have muddied the water in what the public is hearing. So again, I'm not saying that everybody's a liar, I'm just saying it is very convoluted. Now, Mike Cernovich, who was actually one of the key players in getting the first Epstein and Maxwell records unsealed back in 2017, he even tweeted this, and he said, "I've been at a wedding and a vacation. The Epstein release is loaded with unfounded accusations from post-2020 when any mentally ill person could file a report. Way too much obvious nonsense is being pushed. Even CNN did this. Unfortunate, as it means no one knows up from down." And that is the point that I'm really trying to make here, is that everyone is saying that they have these broad conclusions, that this is certifiably, you know, X or Y, and it is based in their biases and their political agenda. I'm sorry, but usually it is in line with your political agenda, especially when it involves Trump. But it's convoluted and it's confusing, and a lot of the information in there is not verified. So with all of that being said, with me laying that groundwork, let's dive into, again, the tiny fraction of things that I have read in the files, what stood out to me, and my thoughts on the government officials and public figures, and possibly the most egregious and disgusting, the people who stood by him and continued to benefit from him after his convictions. Now, before we dive into that, make sure that you like this video and subscribe to our channel if you have not already, and if you benefited or enjoyed this episode. And if you want to stay up to date on everything we're doing on the channel, make sure to ring that notification bell. Also, if you want behind the scenes content and farm vlogs and ad-free episodes, check out cooperconfidential.com. That is my subscription platform. It supports me and helps keep me totally independent for you guys, and I'm so glad that you guys have been loving all of that content. So just diving into things, it seems like all anyone on the political right can talk about right now, other than Jeffrey Epstein, is Nicki Minaj. Because Nicki Minaj, you know, she came out on stage at AmFest. She has come over to the right, even though I think she was always sort of on the right. She's now publicly on the right. She's doing interviews with Stephen Miller's wife. She's hanging out with Trump. She's taking pictures with Mike Johnson. Everybody's like tweeting back at each other. It's like this Barb's, Nicki Minaj, MAGA, Trump love fest. And obviously, that's great. Like, obviously, I am happy for her. I'm happy to have a huge new voice on our team. She's very influential. But like, I'm sorry, some of this has felt incredibly performative. And I know you might be thinking, Brett, she's on our team. What do you mean? Okay, but just look at this tweet. So Nicki Minaj, she posted this, and she said, "Your favorite artist has been practicing rituals in a satanic cult where they take babies from other countries and mutilate and kill them as a form of blood sacrifice to their god. You see, when your master is Satan, you must constantly shed blood. However, the jig is up." So she is basically confirming the existence of a satanic pedo ring, child sacrifice, in Hollywood and in the music industry. That's what she's saying. And so Nikki posted this right after this latest Epstein file drop, and as people were going back and forth about whether all of this information in these emails confirmed the existence of Epstein's satanic pedo ring. And so on top of that, they were now dealing with Nikki's tweet going, oh my gosh, now is this confirmation? And I guess after years of this and this quote unquote conspiracy and talking about this and talking about the pedophiles and Satanism and all of this, like with no real confirmation or transparency, I guess I'm just tired. Like maybe that's the best way to put it. Like I saw this and I went, okay, another accusation, but will it ever lead to anything? Like, will we ever actually know the truth? Will anything actually be done about this? And also, if this is true, then has Nikki just been sitting on this information about child sex trafficking and blood rituals, exploitation for years? Like, does she have proof? Has she taken this information to the police? Has she talked to her new best friend, Donald Trump, about any of this? Or is this just for a reaction online? And her tweet is also painting a very different picture from what has been said to us by the Trump administration. Like Trump saying, all right, here are the files, I'm absolved, we can all move on. Like, glad you all have the information. Or Pam Blondie and Kash Patel saying there was nothing there, which is all so ironic because remember, last year, Pam was like, the files are on my desk. I have the list. I'm making binders. We're going to release all of it. And then randomly, like 2 weeks later, she was like, oh, there's no list. There's nothing to prosecute. There's no file. We can't tell you anything. Sorry, we can't drop anything else. No files. The list does not exist. Like Kash Patel even testified about that. He sat in front of all of our representatives on camera and said, there is nothing there. We have no evidence that we need to prosecute anyone else. It was just Epstein trafficking children to himself. There is nothing there. So like, what are we supposed to believe is what I'm saying? Because 3 million documents with names and emails and pictures and tips could prove otherwise. And now we have Nicki Minaj seemingly confirming a satanic pedo ring in Hollywood and the music industry. So what does it mean? Are we supposed to listen to Nicki Minaj and see these insane files, but just blindly trust the Trump administration and like shut up? Like the only thing that I want silenced are my firearms. And that is why I work with Silencer Shop. Because shooting is great, but shooting suppressed is way better. Now, Alex and I have personally bought suppressors and a few guns through Silencer Shop, and they are just amazing. We use them out on the farm, and shooting suppressed is just a noticeable difference. We have better control, less recoil, and just a more enjoyable shooting experience overall. The problem is, for a long time, getting a suppressor felt expensive and confusing and buried in paperwork, but that is where Silencer Shop comes in. They have made this entire process so simple for you guys, and right now it is easier and more affordable than it has ever been because there is no longer a $200 tax stamp cost, which is one less government tax on your 2A rights. Now, Silencer Shop will walk you through everything. You just choose your suppressor online, you create your profile, sign a couple forms, and they handle all of the heavy lifting. No confusion, just better, more enjoyable shooting. Silencer Shop has already helped hundreds of thousands of Americans get theirs fast and easy, and they also don't stop there, which is just why I love working with them, because Silencer Shop is fighting for your rights. They are actively suing the federal government to make it easier to own suppressors, short-barreled rifles, and other regulated items, because exercising your rights should not come with government overreach, and Silencer Shop is fighting for us. So if you're ready to upgrade your shooting experience and support a great company, head on over to silencershop.com/Cooper to get started. Silencershop.com, because shooting suppressed just makes you better. All right, now back to the files and how just, again, convoluted all of this is and not knowing who to trust. Like, just take a look at this FBI tip that is included in the 3 million files. It is a woman who called in to the FBI, and she alleged that starting around 1996, she was a victim of abuse through Epstein. She says here that she was abducted on 7 occasions, and she names Harvey Weinstein, Jay-Z, Leon Black, and former U.S. Attorney General William Barr. And I'm pretty sure that at the time she put in this tip, he was actually still the Attorney General. And then at the end, she said that 2006 was the last time that she, quote, recalled being abused by Epstein. So this was allegedly 10 years of abuse at his hands, but also at the hands of his friends, including the sitting U.S. Attorney General William Barr, who was in office, who had that role in 2019, which was when she sent in that tip. All of that, things like this, they are in the files. It is sickening. The tips, the emails, the accusations, there are so many stories and tips just like this one. From rape to drugging women to child trafficking to child sacrifice, like everything. And this is what I mean about it being convoluted. Because despite all of that now being public and all of us talking about it, the DOJ is continuing to stand by their position that nothing actually happened. There's nobody to prosecute. Like, they got Epstein, they got Maxwell. That's all that needed or should happen. That is what they are standing by. The Deputy Attorney General said that new charges for anyone are unlikely. Quote, I can't talk about any investigations, but I will say the following, which is in July, the Department of Justice said that we had reviewed the Epstein files and there was nothing in there that allowed us to prosecute anybody. And then we released over 3.5 million pieces of paper, which the entire world can now look at and see if we got it wrong. So they did their review, and there's nobody there to prosecute. So then we have to ask, like, are they lying? Are they intentionally turning a blind eye, or are these files full of falsehoods or unverified claims and they're not being honest about what is actually being released? Again, insanity. It genuinely feels like insanity. It also feels like it's kind of some like operation of mass confusion and contagion. Like, what are they trying to distract us from now? We're all talking about Epstein. We're all bickering about who's right and what conclusion is accurate. Like, what is going on behind the scenes that they are not telling us? But anyway, I am going to allow myself to be distracted from whatever that thing is. And let's talk about what stood out to me in the files. Because from where I am standing and what I am seeing with my own two eyes and actually reading, Epstein was friends with everyone. In every industry in the world, he basically existed. This was a man who just existed to network and social climb in order to increase his wealth. It seems like he spoke to or emailed with every single major player in politics and in business, whether they were complicit or not in his disgusting fetishes. And what I have seen in these files actually tells me a lot more about how politics and elite circles work, especially at extreme levels of wealth, more than what he and Maxwell were doing with his child models and prostitutes on the island. Because again, there is a lot of confusion with all of that. And back to my point, like, just take a look at what Mike Benz pulled from the files about Epstein teaching the former Israeli prime minister and then at that time the head of the IDF on how to convert political power into financial power in the private sector. So Mike Benz tweeted and said, I am utterly blown away by this new audio in the Epstein files. It shows the secret conversation you fear every high-level government official might have with an outside fixer. That's what a lot of people are saying that Epstein was, outside fixer, to hook them up the moment they leave government to enter the private sector. Here, Jeffrey Epstein teaches Ehud Barak, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, while he is still Minister of Defense in Israel but on his way out, how to make millions of dollars in the private sector by first compiling a list of people who owe him favors from his 40 years in government service. Take a listen.
You should make a list of his worth, not was
metrics.
He said, yes, but who has IOUs to you? Is that who's out of the people in the past who you think you're close to? He said that he really wanted you to make this list of this person owes me a favor, this person owes me his life, this person owes me his job.
So what you're hearing him say, again, this is someone who led Israel's most elite covert commando unit and then became head of Israeli military intelligence, then became the head of the country, and then became the head of its military, and is now going out on his own at the age of 71 to try to make money to convert what was government power into personal financial power. Now, it appears that Epstein played this role in the United States with CIA Director Bill Burns. It appears that he played this role in the UK. It's probably likely that he played this role with the Saudis as well. All
right, now pausing that clip there, and just FYI, if you didn't know, that was Mike Benz speaking at the end of that clip, providing his own commentary. But I think any of us with common sense and a general dose of, reality, maybe pessimism about the government, know that this sort of thing does transpire. And Epstein's story has always been rife with accusations of blackmail and his involvement in foreign governments, but this shows us more clearly how this playbook was executed and Epstein's role as this kind of consultant, advisor, or quote-unquote fixer. Like somebody commented and said, this audio describes a textbook revolving door playbook. Convert public office into private leverage, monetize networks built on state power, and launder influence through advisory roles and venture capital. Epstein isn't pitching ideology or blackmail. He is pitching access arbitrage. If the timing and context are accurate, it reinforces something that journalists have documented for years. Corruption at the top rarely looks like envelopes of cash. It looks like quiet introductions, deferred favors, and post-government opportunities that are technically legal and morally radioactive. That is why this matters, not because of Epstein's notoriety alone, but because it shows how power actually cashes out after office. And so again, the point is, it's not just about Epstein or his role, but it is about how government works at that high of a level. How these people in office who are elected to represent us on, $80,000 a year salaries somehow exit with a net worth of $70 million and all of these, connections, and they're traveling around the world and now they're in venture capital. It's like, how did that happen? We all know But actually hearing that play out, I don't know. That's just kind of a reassuring confirmation that we all weren't crazy. Now, another thing to note about this more specifically is that this recording and the other interactions in the files between Epstein and Barack were after Epstein had already been arrested and classified as a high-risk sex offender, which again happened in 2011. He was arrested in 2008. He served 13 months in prison in 2009, I believe, 2008 to 2009, and then he was classified as a sex offender in 2011. This was after all of that. All of that information was relatively public, and people, like we are seeing right here, were still working with him and were still using him as that consultant and fixer. Now, the other thing I want to say that is relevant and then just adds a layer of corruption here is that, yes, Epstein served time. Yes, he was convicted in 2008, but a lot of that was kept on the down low. Like, you really only knew that if you were a, journalist in Florida. There were some whistleblowers, but a lot of them were just deemed conspiracy theorists, like crazy right-wing lunatics going after Epstein, kind of like we're dealing with today. But there was a major PR push from Epstein's team to keep all of this quiet. Like, in the files, we see evidence that he was paying tens of thousands of dollars every single month to hide articles and information about his crime. He and his team were paying monthly to manipulate SEO and the algorithm to keep all of that hidden. So yes, I am guessing that most people knew, especially at a very high level, if you were dealing with him all the time, if you were going to his island, I'm guessing you knew that he was a creep and a pedophile, but to the outside world, that might be the reason why a lot of people didn't know until much later on. But back to the point with somebody like Barack, he was still coming to the island. Here is an email of Barack coordinating his trip in 2014 and confirming to Epstein, weirdly, that he won't be bringing his security. So to round out this whole story, and another reason why I'm including that recording in these emails, if we're believing what Kash Patel and Pam Bondi are saying, then based on this, the story would be that yes, Epstein obviously was a certifiable freak who trafficked and abused minors because of his sex fetishes, but he and Maxwell only trafficked to himself. However, even though that became public, he was so well connected, he probably had dirt and unpaid favors like we're seeing with people, that high-level people in politics and business just turned a blind eye and they continued to run in his circles. But according to them, Kash and Bondi, he wasn't trafficking children to them. So that's kind of the story that we are being served now, which again, even if they were not trafficking and abusing children, it does tell us a lot about the morality and the values of our elite political and ruling class. I'm sorry, they all need to find God, pray, maybe download Hallow. Now, I know it feels like Christmas just wrapped up and somehow we are already talking about Easter, but here we are. Lent is coming, and honestly, I love this season because in just a few weeks, those 40 days leading up to Easter begin, which is a time to turn away from what holds us back from true peace, real humility, and a deeper relationship with God. And Lent is not meant to be comfortable. It is about cutting through the noise, dropping what weighs you down, and doing the work to become who God is calling you to be. Now, this Ash Wednesday, Hallow is launching Lent Pray 40 The Return, which is a 40-day prayer journey to Easter featuring Jonathan Rumi, Mark Wahlberg, my favorite, Father Mike Schmitz, Sister Miriam James, Chris Pratt, and so many more. It is centered on the parable of the prodigal son, and it reminds us that we are never too far gone. You will find daily prayers and meditations, Friday fasts and honest conversations, and powerful Sunday homilies. Lent starts with one bold step towards God together daily, and it starts Ash Wednesday, which is February 18th. So if you are done carrying the weight and you're ready to come home, join Pray 40. It is waiting for you on the Hallow app. Get 3 months free at hallow.com/Cooper. Again, hallow.com/Cooper. Now, while you are taking care of your soul, do not forget to take care of your skin as well with my favorite product. And obviously, I am talking about beef tallow from Amallo Tallow. And I know that it sounds wild, but the results speak for themselves. And apparently, a lot of you guys agree because every time I mention it or post about it, you guys try it, you order it, and you get instantly hooked. It's simply one of those products that just works for everyone and that everyone seems to like. And tallow is literally just rendered beef fat. It is packed with the same fatty acids and nutrients that your skin naturally makes and uses. It absorbs, hydrates, and helps your skin stay balanced without all the unnecessary toxic ingredients that is stuffed into most synthetic moisturizers that also never really deliver. And also, if you're like me and you deal with dry skin in the winter, this is the perfect time to try out that tallow. This isn't just some new skincare trend because tallow has been used for ages to support skin naturally. And out of all of the brands out there, Amallo is the one that I trust. I've worked with them for years now. They are a small family-owned business making everything in the USA with grass-fed tallow and organic essential oils. They are clean, minimal, small batch, and so effective. So if you've been on the fence about trying out Amallo, this is your sign. You can grab it along with their other amazing non-toxic products with a special 15% off discount at amallo.com/Cooper using code Cooper15 at checkout. Again, that is amallo.com/Cooper. Use code Cooper15 at checkout to redeem that discount. Now back to the point about the people who were connected to him. Let me tell you, there were a lot of people who still stayed in his circle after 2008 and 2011. Like, basically everyone and their mother is in these files. Like, I'm not kidding. Zohran Mamdani's mother is even in the files. Like, look at this email. It's from 2009 from Epstein's publicist. Again, after conviction, after jail time. And this publicist, Peggy, is talking about a party that Ghislaine Maxwell hosted at her house. And one of the people in attendance was director Mira Nair. Nair, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but that is Zohran Mamdani's mother. However, now we need to give this disclaimer. Just because she was included in the files does not mean that his mother is guilty, or that anyone's mothers are guilty, or that they were trafficking children or having children trafficked to them. But regardless, people are still running with theories. Just because somebody is included, they are running with it, including posting AI slop, like fake photos of Mamdani, his mom, and Epstein. Like, just take a look at this. Like, guys, that is not a real image. That is fake. Like, why are we making up BS? But this is what people are consuming and running with. But I thank God, again, for the community notes. This person is saying this is AI generated, created by this account. But people are already running with it. Like, the boomers are already posting it on Facebook. Now this is a story that people are having to muddle through. Like, nobody knows what to believe. However, being fair here, there are some people who seem far more incriminated, like Peter Adia, who is a well-known longevity doctor and a new CBS health contributor under Barry Weiss. Now, Peter was friends with Epstein and occasionally gave him medical advice, and he shows up over 1,700 times in these files. And probably the most viral email, the most viral correspondence between the two men is this one, again, after convictions, after all of this is public, from 2016. And Peter emails Jeffrey and says, pussy is indeed low carb. Still waiting results on gluten content, though. And then there is this one where Peter says, the biggest problem with becoming friends with you, the life you lead is so outrageous, and yet I can't tell a soul. Your life is so outrageous, but I can't tell. What did you know, Peter? What could you not tell people? What was so outrageous that maybe wasn't commonplace knowledge until a year later in 2017, thanks to Mike Cernovich? What did you know? Well, after the 1,700 appearances in the files, Peter has now put out a long apology on X, which we will show you right here. And basically in this apology, he says that he should have pulled back from Epstein. He says that he was never involved in criminal activity or went to the island. But interestingly, he doesn't say that he didn't know about Epstein's trafficking or his fetishes, his convictions, the abuse. He leaves that out of his apology. He says, I didn't participate, but he doesn't say, I had no idea. Now, Alex Clark put it best, and she simply commented under his apology and said, you're done, you're done. Yeah, and I think most of the internet would agree with that. Now, sort of similarly to this situation, probably the most viral of all emails from this drop of 3 million files is the email suggesting that Bill Gates was so involved with hookers and prostitutes and Epstein that he asked for help getting STD antibiotics that he could secretly give his wife, Melinda. Take a look at this. So here is this email here. Another thing that is interesting to note is that we know it's about Bill Gates because it says, Dear Bill, and then down here he's talking about Melinda, but this is an email that Jeffrey sent Jeffrey. Like, this is a draft he was working on. Like, he was prepping a little blackmail situation. He was prepping don't test me, Bill. I don't know what that is, but to be fair, this was an email that Jeffrey sent himself. And basically what we can see here is that he is responding to Bill pulling back from their friendship and asking him to delete evidence of their friendship. He's angry about it. He's pulling out all the stops. And this is the sentence that really went viral. He says to Bill, allegedly, to add insult to injury, you then implore me to please delete the emails regarding your STD, your request that I provide you antibiotics that you can surreptitiously give to Melinda, and the description of your penis. Great. I'm so glad we have this information. This has been a terrible week for Bill Gates. Now, while Bill Gates still insists that he is innocent, that he didn't know, that he pulled back from the relationship, here is what his ex-wife, now ex-wife Melinda, had to say. This is from a recent interview from this week.
No girl should ever be put in the situation that they were put in by Epstein and whatever was going on with all of the various people around him. No girl. I mean, it's beyond heartbreaking, right? I remember being those ages those girls were. I remember my daughters being those ages, right? So, for me, it's personally hard whenever those details come up, right? Because brings back memories of some very, very painful times in my marriage. But I have moved on from that. I purposely pushed it away and I moved on. I'm in a really unexpected, beautiful place in my life. So whatever questions remain there of what I can't even begin to know all of it, those questions are for those people and for even my ex-husband. They need to answer to those things, not me.
Now, again, that interview was from this week. She's responding to this drop and those emails and Bill's inclusion in these files. But this is not the first time that she has spoken about Epstein. Back when she and Bill Gates divorced, I think that who was she? It wasn't Hoda that she was being interviewed by, but she was doing an interview on the news, and she acknowledged that Bill's relationship with Epstein was a part of their marriage deteriorating. She was like, there are other things, but that was something that I really could not come back from. Now, she has never publicly said that her husband was sleeping with hookers, trafficking children, anything like that. She is just saying that was a relationship that was disgusting to me. He would not stop being friends with him. I met him once. It was so eerie and disgusting. I pulled back, and she cites that as one of the reasons that they did get divorced. Now, back to Bill Gates and that whole correspondence. Yes, to confirm, that email, that draft was also post-conviction. It was in 2013. And interestingly, look what else Bill Gates was doing in 2013. This person posted a screenshot and said, by the way, the Bill Gates STD email was in July 2013. And then he posts this article. Bill Gates is offering $100K to whoever can make a next generation condom. And that was in March of 2013. So allegedly, that would be after the STD had already happened, after he had already sent emails to Epstein talking about his penis. Then a few months later, Epstein then pulls out all the stops. He's obviously asking Epstein to delete all the information. But yes, that is what Bill Gates was doing in 2013, which is interesting. Like, you just cannot make this stuff up. Now, also, another thing I want to add here is, I'm sorry, but I am also just so over the shock, the performative outrage from some of our politicians. Like, look at this post from Nancy Mace. She is responding to the Bill Gates accusations, and she says, last night, I watched the Melinda Gates interview. I immediately asked the chairman of oversight, James Comer, to subpoena Bill Gates. I have questions for Bill Gates about Epstein. Now you have questions? Years later, we have known they were associated. Melinda has been talking about this for years, since they got divorced. Why didn't you do this ages ago? I'm sorry, you tweeting that, Nancy Mace, is purely for attention. You are an attention whore. It is performative. This is the only reason you posted this. Yes, obviously, we have questions. We have questions about a lot of things, in regards to Bill Gates. Why was Bill Gates and Jeffrey Epstein emailing about pandemic simulations in 2017? Now, again, sharing all of this with you, this is so much more encompassing than just Epstein's sex abuse, which is insane for me to say, and that should not take away from how disgusting that was. But this is an even bigger story, and that's what these files are showing me. How much was Epstein really involved in? And also, how interconnected is our political and medical and elite business world anyway? To the point that this man, this consultant, advisor, fixer, a man convicted of trafficking and abusing women and children, was this influential and, dare I say, loved until his death. How disgusting and corrupt of a world do we live in, is our government, if this is the reality that we are now facing? Now, in her recap of this entire file drop, my friend Liz Wheeler, she summed up a lot of this really well, especially regarding Trump, which I really didn't touch on in this episode because a lot of people have already been talking about it. But just so we're all on the same page here, she said, what do I think of the Epstein docs? Well, Bondi is an idiot for not releasing them a year ago. Trump is totally exonerated again, not a whiff of wrongdoing in 3 million documents. In fact, Trump never got a massage per Epstein himself, who hated Trump. Totally exonerated. Democrats are liars. Duh. Mainstream media is worse than you think. The tip line allegation that Trump raped a 13-year-old were deemed by the FBI to be non-credible. That tip line was open to any nutcase who called in. Most accusations were secondhand gossip and easily disproved. That also isn't just about Trump. Again, that's why all of this is just convoluted and confusing. Case in point, she says, part of the allegations involved Trump's LA golf course. The allegation was supposedly from 1995 to 1996, but Trump's LA golf course didn't open until 2006. The media knows this. They just hate you. And they have an agenda. Everybody has a political agenda. Liz then goes on and says Democrats loved Epstein. Sitting Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett not only texted Epstein for advice during a live congressional hearing, she visited Epstein's island many times. Sick. Where are the Democrats censoring her? Crickets. Obama's White House counsel advised Epstein on how to smear Trump. Ew. And perhaps most interestingly of all, Epstein emailed former Israeli PM Barak about denying association with the Mossad. She says. I think we all know at this point that Epstein certainly brokered deals for Israeli intel, among other intel agencies, off the books. Plus, a photo of Epstein in a room filled with stacks of bankers' boxes labeled CIA. A FOIA request from Epstein to disclose what info the CIA had on him. And then Liz goes on and offers her conclusion. And she says, interestingly, in the past year, no thanks to the DOJ, it has gone from a question to establish with ample evidence that Epstein was associated with intel agencies. Doing what? Brokering off-the-books deals that governments didn't want to appear directly involved in, though they were. So Epstein served as a liaison and profited hugely. A year ago, we were branded as conspiracy theorists at best for suggesting that. Now, even Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu seemed to acknowledge it when he posted an article about it. Which again brings us all full circle to the reason we have been demanding justice on Epstein for so long. He committed heinous sex crimes. He was let off easy for those crimes. We know why now, due to his obvious associations with global intel agencies. But who let him off? And that question is unanswered, she says. Democrats' lies about Trump have been exposed, though, and Trump was exonerated again. So again, more information and certainly more questions are stemming from all of this. But in my opinion, it is now clear that people in government and business and in medicine all turned a blind eye to Epstein's crimes. Whether it is because they partook, or whether they wanted access to him, whether they were blackmailed, or just didn't care because they are so deviant and disgusting themselves, I don't know, but it is clear that they ignored, did not care, whatever it is. And it is also now even more abundantly clear that there are systems in place to allow people to stay in power and financially gain from their public service roles. And finally, it is also very clear that there are political agendas driving many of the reactions and conclusions to these drops, which again, I don't know how many times I can say it, just makes the entire thing so confusing and makes me so trepidatious about trusting anyone. Now, again, I will tell you guys, I will not pretend, I will not lie to you, I will not say that I have read or consumed everything because I have not. I have not gotten through 3.5 million files, but these are my takeaways from what I have consumed. And it makes me frustrated with the grandstanders who lie and gaslight Americans and make broad, sweeping statements and claims about these crimes, especially when no accountability actually follows. So all of this happens, we see this drop, we see this insane information about how government works, and then people wonder why trust in not only media, but also the government is at an all-time low. That's probably my biggest takeaway from these files.